Welcome to our container security group meeting. So I've got the first one. I just wanted to follow up on this one synchronously rather than asynchronously because I feel like there's a discussion to be had around it. So going back, thank you, Arthur, for your additional research on adding support for GMA v1, v2, and self-managed for the alerts. I think now we have a decision to make, right? Of which of those three bullets do we go with and which one? As I've thought about it, it's a little bit hard to say exactly where things are going to land. I know the configure team is working to add yet another option to that mix by having an agent in the cluster. And from my discussions with their team, you know, it's a little bit hard to tell exactly what the future of GMA v1 and v2 are going to be. So my inclination for now is to just go with the cheapest option so that we can get feedback and get it released and out to customers. And then we can add support for the other two bullets later on if customers ask for it. And, you know, that'll buy us some time as well to see how things shake out on the configure team. To know where we want to support long term. So I guess that leads me into my question, which is, you know, what's the relative cost of each of those three items? You know, what's the cheapest of the three, cheapest and easiest?
I think ultimately it's GMA v1 because that's what Monitor Teams uses right now and has ability to create alerts, but the problem is that Cilium is v2, and as we discussed yesterday, mixing those two makes certain things much harder. In this case, installation of parameters is a bit harder, so we have to either, as I mentioned, improve the support between GMA v2 and v1 in the same deployment environment, or as we discussed yesterday, maybe some docs that clearly say that there is a risk of mixing two at the same cluster, and to avoid issues, do this thing specifically. But yeah, for alerts specifically, GMA v1 is just a bit more slightly easy to integrate. Just again, since we're aligning with Monitor Team, it feels like what they're mostly relying on. It kind of feels they're having a shift in direction right now. At least reading from the docs, there was a lot of broken links.
Yeah.
So I think what they're trying to do, they try to focus on the incident management part rather than the alerts part. And the alert generation is being transformed into something generic. And we briefly discussed yesterday. So it's like, at least what I felt like from reading their docs is that they want to provide you an endpoint and you generate alert wherever the way you want. It might be your Prometheus instance, it might be any third-party integration. They just don't care, like, as long as they will trigger alert on the GitLab endpoint, and then they start doing the UI magic, creating alerts, fingerprinting alerts. They allow you to create incidents and stuff like that. So yeah,
Arthur, can I ask a question about what you just explained? So yesterday I had misunderstood that option 3 wouldn't be able to use v1, but now I'm hearing that with what the alerts team is doing, maybe we can get an external Prometheus.
With v1 and external Prometheus is kind of different things, right?
Yeah.
So with external Prometheus, the downside is you can't create alerts on it from the GitLab UI. So and that's the issue I uncovered additionally to what I said yesterday.
Yeah, that's what I understood.
Yeah,
but now
yesterday my idea was, and my understanding was, that external Prometheus probably is the best option for us right now. But again, further investigation after the discussion we had yesterday uncovered that the alert creation is not possible at all on the external instances. So I'm kind of, and again, with the questions that Sam is asking, what's the easiest way for us right now to at least have some kind of alerts in place? It's GMAV1, unfortunately. And
but then again, are you saying that the alerts team, monitor health team, are looking to allow alerts to come from external, or no?
No, what I'm saying is I think at least that's what I'm getting from the reading docs. I did not engage with discussions yet with them. What they want to do, they don't want to even focus on Prometheus specifically. What they want to do is treat alert as a generic entity. It can be generated by literally anything. So the way they try to abstract it is by providing API endpoint that you can use to create alerts inside GitLab. So it's kind of shifts responsibility from GitLab to generate alert entity in the database, like previously they were relying on Prometheus, to something external. And I think they mentioned in the docs Opgenie as something that's coming as an additional alternative to Prometheus, which I understand as a paid service. And then again, they literally allow you to create like free per load alerts in the system. So again, I'm just trying to say that GMAV1 is just the easiest option right now, but we can end up in the same situation with our orchestration group we are having right now. Is that monitor team is shifting in a different direction. They're kind of going away with Prometheus. At least that's what I'm getting a feeling of. So again, sticking to GMAV1 still might be a risky long-term decision. Does it
Doesn't
make
sound like
sense?
you. Yeah, it does. Thank you. But Sam, question for you. It doesn't sound like you looking for any long-term decisions anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, because things are, I feel like that's even more reason to go with the cheapest option, because if things are changing there, you know, we've got things changing in orchestration group, we've got things changing in monitor group, like let's make the minimal investment to get it working. That gives us time, they can make their changes, and when the dust settles, you know, when we have an idea of where they're going to be long-term, then we can invest in that long-term solution too. But yeah, again, I'm thinking the cheapest option is the best way to go for now. And if that's GMA v1, then we should probably do that.
Zamir, yeah, Zamir.
It's exactly what Sam, on the same note that Sam is talking about. I think looking back now, if we had Cilium just done for V1, we would have solved so many, we would have avoid so many issues that we are having now. So sometimes I just prefer to go cheap and see what would come out from the research. And then later on, we can integrate better if needed.
Well, with this, do you implying that we should do a GMA v1 Cilium integration, or is just an expression of regret of like a 2020 hindsight thing?
No, not regret. It's just learning.
Right.
I kind of disagree because the reason to go with V2 specifically is that Cilium doesn't really fit in the V1 paradigm when we have a predefined vendor Helm values that are sitting in GitLab and you can't change them. That's not going to work for Cilium. Again, at least like it's already unique even in V2 because you have to explicitly say which type of cloud you use. And based on that, we make decisions which flags to include in installation. And on top of that, we are not even officially supporting more advanced options in Cilium, like native routing. And I think most users that would prefer to use native routing where possible. If we will go with V1, we essentially will cut off possibilities of using native routing completely. And I think it's just a bad decision. So I don't think that GMA V1 for Cilium is like any kind of good possibility. It's kind of similar to Prometheus because like while we can create alerts up there, we just limit what user can do overall because we manage everything in Prometheus, and the users can't control anything what is happening with their Prometheus instance. And I overall think that's, again, for a lot of customers will be a no-go straight away. That's why I'm a bit cautious about that.
Cool, thanks for that. If we're going with V1 and we have to mix with Cilium on V2, we talked about before addressing like documentation, just playing with the facts and going, here's the situation, here's what you need to know about this choice. Would you consider, Sam, addressing making it safe to mix V1 and V2, like so would be a next step after documentation?
Just before,
yeah, absolutely. I want to know the answer to your question there of the t-shirt sizes. But yeah, absolutely, we would consider that.
Sorry about the docs. I think docs are fine to some extent, but one of the ideas that we can explore is making it a bit easier to coexist in mixed environments. So the problem right now is that triggering V2 pipeline after V1 install essentially can result in an install of V1 application. And I think it's just the nature of V2 being so forceful with installation, so we could maybe relax a bit the pipelines in V2 in terms of like if user didn't say explicitly like Prometheus is like, because by default Prometheus will be set to false in V2 and it will cause an install. So maybe we can change this logic to something like if user did not explicitly say Prometheus false, we don't imply this value automatically. I think this fix is not really hard to do in cluster applications, and it can be a viable solution that will allow a bit better mixing of V1 and V2.
Did I represent correctly your idea in the minutes?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so I agree. So those are kind of our two options there. I guess the question is, what's the relative cost of each one? Because we could just do docs and we could actually try to do as you suggest there, Arthur, and relax the V2 pipelines. Do we have any idea or t-shirt size on what that would be?
I would settle on weight of 3 or 4, but the problem is we don't control that project ourselves, so we need to engage and see how cluster of like the groups that is mentioned right now, it's orchestration, will feel about this particular change. I hope if they are not against that, like it literally won't take much to implement. We just have to change how Hemfile triggers deployments. And for V1 alerts, like alerts based on V1, it's pretty easy. I mentioned yesterday that using V1, I was able to essentially set up like a prototype, what we're kind of trying to do quite fast. So V1 up there is pretty much means relying on what monitor team already has in place.
Who should reach out? Just should we come around product or engineering on with the configure team? Sort of ask for their blessing.
I can ask in Slack if it will go well. Maybe something will work out, and if not, we could try to engage a bit more officially.
I'm curious to know what Sam thinks as well, because Sam has already engaged with the product manager. So I wonder if it's a conversation that's worth carrying.
I think it's a bit technical for project managers to think about. At least if like PMs want to engage, we need an issue that describes the idea itself. But I suspect with what I see right now, there is not much happening in that project, and the team overall is not focusing much. So maybe we will get a free pass because it's kind of abandoned.
Yeah, I think I'll be able to get their product manager on board, no problem. But at the end of the day, it's the maintainers that have to merge it in. So I think the bigger discussion there is on the technical side. I agree with Arthur. I mean, I'm happy to reach out, to their product manager, but.
No, I'm happy with that. I agree with it as well. Wanted to make sure you're on board, Sam.
Great. Okay, so decision-wise, it sounds like let's decide with going with GMA v1 for now, since that seems to be the cheapest. And for now, we'll start with just documentation, but in parallel, we'll talk with the configure team and see if they're open to fixing the problem. I mean, we're going to need documentation either way. I think in the spirit of iteration, we can probably release with just the documentation and then fix, how V1 and V2 work together later if we have to. If it all goes out at the same time, great, but they're almost independent events. So I think we can go forward with both in parallel there.
Thanks. Just to close this out, Zamir, you've refined the epic. With this changes some of the issues that we have already refined. Are you happy to go in there and update them? Do you know what to do, or would you like some help?
Oh, I can go there and update them.
Awesome. I'm around.
Okay. Just finishing the notes here. So the next topic, unless there's more comments on alert management support, I wanted to touch just briefly on our upcoming roadmap. So I know we've talked about this before to some extent. We're getting closer to actually formalizing some plans around scanning for vulnerabilities in a production environment. So that's probably one of the next big things that's coming up that we still need to define for planning breakdown. At a high level, the idea is that we would start with just package scanning. So what Claire and Clar do today, which is looking at the packages that are installed, comparing them to known CVEs, and reporting on any vulnerabilities from there. We'd want to actually create a vulnerability object rather than an alert, because it is a vulnerability, and feed that into Matt's security dashboard. So I just wanted us to start thinking about that and discussing how that might work. We don't have to sort it all out today. It's not ready for formal planning breakdown or anything like that, but I just wanted to open the discussion since that's going to be kind of the next big thing coming up on the roadmap. Just a couple other comments. It's not part of the pipeline job. So all of the other things in secure, all of the other scanning jobs happen as part of a pipeline. Of course, if we're talking about scanning something in production, that lives outside of a pipeline. So we need some way to schedule that on a regular basis. Suppose the user puts in like, I want to scan once a day at 2 a.m. Brings up questions of where would that configuration live. Anyway, again, I just wanted to start the discussion on that, see what feedback and questions you have for me, so I can flesh out that issue some more and get it ready for planning breakdown. Zamir.
I just had one, I was a little bit unsure of the context there. So I was thinking that we would have something like a cluster application installed through cluster management that would handle this configuration and generate some logging or artifacts. But now that you added way more details now, so then yeah, it's clear now. Thanks for that.
So is that how you would go? Would we want to install an application that way, or would we have it? Would we have the code execute on the GitLab server and just remotely connect into Kubernetes to scan it? I don't know. I'm asking.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. From the applications that we saw before, we had that spike that we had a couple of applications. Was there any application that would be like good for this situation that you're considering for the first iteration? Or would you be would you expecting something different, like a different scenario for this?
I don't totally understand the question, but the scenario would be that, say I've deployed 5 pods into Kubernetes, and each of those pods just has 1 container each, so 5 different containers. I want to go out and scan those to see all of the packages installed inside of those containers and compare those to a list of known vulnerabilities. So that's what Claire and Clar do today. They're open source tools that do that. The question is, whether you have to install something into Kubernetes and then it runs there, or whether it runs off of GitLab and we remote into Kubernetes to do it. I think we could do it either way. I don't know.
I think for CDEs and general vulnerabilities related to the images, Claire can do that on a pipeline level. So then, because it doesn't consider what's running inside, it's just what the image is about.
I think there's worse clarifying that I'm pretty sure the Claire can't do, like what Sam wants is to scan for CVEs from inside the running container. And yes. I'm pretty sure Claire can't do that. The Claire works a bit differently. So it goes, grabs a Docker image. Docker image is essentially a pie of different levels of the system that is sliced together. So it goes and checks each slice against the vulnerability database. The Trivy container scanner that I linked you the other time, Sam, it actually can do that. You can put Trivy inside the container and it can do scans from inside container too. It also supports scans from the outside container the same way Query does. Trivy is actually a really good scanner for our use case, and it's really easy to kind of use it. You get binary, you put it inside the container, and you can do it at the runtime level if you have permissions, obviously, to do that inside the Kubernetes cluster, and then you can just run the binary from inside the container, and Trivy will do that. There is a huge problem with Trivy. It's implemented by Aquasec, which is direct competitor to us. So I'm not sure if we can use that, but Trivy is probably the best scanner on the market right now. Query is not being actively developed, as I understand, and it has a really crucial limitation right now. It only supports Docker images, and there are different specs for how to create images, and the most actively developed spec right now is OCI Time. It's official container spec right now, and Docker is slowly going away, and Claire can only scan specification of a Docker, but Trivy can scan both specifications. So it's really crucial. And Trivy also can scan beyond just file system. It can scan application dependencies, like let's say Ruby gems that are sitting inside container, which is also a really cool feature. Trivy is open source, but again, it's Aquasec. So I'm not sure what's the what's the politics of the GitLab in terms of using competitor products in our environments. I think you're muted or something.
You muted, Sam.
Yeah, we can. I mean, I think we'd probably want to do something like what we did with Falco, where we give it another name, like a marketing name, just in case we decided to switch out the engine later. so that it gives us that flexibility, right? So instead of calling it Trivy, we might call it, I don't know what, GitLab scanning or something. You know, we'll make up our own name for it, just to help a little bit with, that way if we ever did switch away from Trivy in the future, it would be more transparent to the end user. Of course, there's going to be some impact still because the functionality will change at least a little bit, but it'll at least be a little bit more separated, less visible to the end user. But I think they're an option. I'd probably need to talk with some other folks at GitLab to just double check.
And does Trivy only needs Kubernetes credentials to oversimplify? It doesn't need credentials to each running container. Is that correct?
It needs credential to, I guess, mount in another container into its own
to mount the file system, basically. Kubernetes permissions to mount the file system.
Yeah. So
not access to each container's running OS, which would
we don't need to run OS. We essentially need to ability to embed a Trivy binary inside the container so we can execute the scan. Trivy also has a really cool feature, which is client-server mode, because scanning itself doesn't do anything unless you have a database. And with Clay, you have to like constantly have a database next to you. With Trivy, you can use a Trivy client to get information from the runtime, but actual, I think, matching against CVE database happens externally. So it's a really good model for us. We can have a server inside our runtime somewhere where we have less restrictions, and then Trivy will be like doing the lightweight operations inside the container. Yeah, Trivy has like way more features that are quite useful in most situations.
Do you know? I know we're at time. Arthur, do you or does anybody else know of any other? It looks like Trivy is a very interesting option. Any other things similar to Trivy that operate in a similar way?
I think those two are usually recommended from what I was researching previously for my personal purposes.
Any others that you've come across, or anybody has come across?
I don't know of any other open
I'm sure there are
ones.
others. Are they good or better than? Are they better or not as good as Trivy, or better for us? I don't know, but yeah. But it's good to know that Trivy is a potential thing to look into. The ones that I know of are not container.
One of the options, I think.
Well, one of the ones that I'm familiar with are not container or container native. They're things like scan, give it credentials to the running container, and then it logs in SSH. It does a network scan and it SSHs in and gets package listings. Like OpenBAS is a good option for things like that, but it is not container friend. It is not Kubernetes or container friendly. So that something like that would probably not be a good fit for us.
It's a bit hard to ask users to put a shell inside their containers, unfortunately. Yeah, it's a bit. What I want to say, I think Trivy has a comparison with competitors on the GitHub page, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe we can source alternatives from there. But I just have not seen anything else mentioned in the post that I was previously researching.
Got it. Well, thanks for your input here. Hopefully I helped to clarify what we're looking for requirements-wise a little bit. Obviously, right now our focus is on alert management, so don't worry too much about this, but I will post some of those open questions on the issue since we're at time here, and we can continue the discussion async, just as we start to think about how we might head down that direction.
Thanks a lot, Sam.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.